What were Yuji's grandfather's last words gonna be? What did he know? Let's talk about it, but spoilers beware. All right, first of all, shout out to Grandma Tito who wanted my opinion on this. And this is something I've made a video about before, but it was over a year ago and before JJK ended. So now that we have all of the information, let's take a look at this. All right, so first, just a quick reminder of what even went down in this scene. And Yuji's grandpa says, "Yuji, I have some final words for you. It's about your parents." And Yuji says, "Stop, I don't care." And his grandpa says, "It's about your parents." And Yuji says, "Like I said, I don't care, Grandpa. Will you stop trying to act all cool before you die?" This scene actually tells us a lot about their relationship because Yuji's indifference to learning about his parents shows that he doesn't really know anything about his parents and they've never been a part of his life, which is why he doesn't care, right? He realizes that his grandpa in his final moments is trying to share this information, but to Yuji, those are complete strangers that have never had any impact on him, right? His grandpa is his family. That's who he cares about. So he doesn't even need to entertain hearing about these two strangers because they're not what's important to him, right? Which is why he tells his grandpa, "I don't care. You're my family." That's the through line here. But what was he going to say? Well, now that the story's over, I think it's pretty clear that he was just going to explain to Yuji about the bizarre circumstances surrounding his birth, and namely, whatever was going on with his mom. "Yuji, there's something I need to tell you about your parents. Back before you were born, your mom passed away. We buried her in the ground. We had a funeral and everything. And then she just somehow came back with a huge old scar across her forehead and acting like somebody else. I obviously thought this was incredibly bizarre and strange and something really weird was going on. But your dad, he couldn't hear it. He was too lost in his own grief, and he decided to just take this W and continue living with this weird zombie version of your mom. And then they gave birth to you. I obviously thought this was an insane scenario, so I took you and I've raised you, and that's why, they've not been a part of your life. I just thought you should know that before I get on out of here." I think some version of that is what he was going to say to Yuji in that moment. And that's essentially confirmed with the story now over and knowing the relationship between his grandpa, Kaori, and Jin Itadori, right? So it just makes sense that he was just going to fill Yuji in on that. The interesting question, though, is just how much he knew about what was going on there. And at this point, we just enter pure speculation territory because there was never any further light shined on what exactly his grandpa knew. But personally, I think it would be interesting if he knew far more than just, "Oh, she somehow came back to life, and I thought that was weird." Because here in this scene where we see him warning his son Jin, he's like, "Hey, you can live your life however you like, but give up on that woman. You'll die." And look at the stern look on his face, right? To me, this doesn't read as someone who's just completely bewildered by the fact that his daughter-in-law resurrected from the grave, right? To me, that would be more scared and kind of what is this, grandson? What's going on here? But no, it's not emotion in that way, right? It's more like a stern warning, "Hey, just you do what you want, but get away from her. She's death." We know that Kinjaku has been setting up this plan for literal centuries, experimenting all along the way, trial and error, right? Trying to set up everything just right. And that ultimately culminated in Yuji as the perfect vessel, right? But I highly doubt that Kinjaku got it right on the first time. And we know that Kinjaku did lots of experimenting with cursed wombs and the cursed womb death paintings. And, Yuji probably wasn't just a happy accident. It was the result of hundreds and hundreds of years. And we also know that Yuji's grandfather is the reincarnation of Suguna's twin brother. And that's not a coincidence, right? That was explicitly planned by Kinjaku. He sought out this bloodline. That is why he took over Kaori's body and had a baby with Jin, because he was trying to reintegrate into this bloodline in order to create a perfect vessel for Sukuna. I think it very well could be that this reaction here isn't just because his daughter-in-law came back to life somehow, but is instead because he has personal experience in dealing with somebody with a forehead scar like this. Perhaps he himself was tricked and seduced by Kinjaku in the past. Perhaps even to birth Jin, right? Jin could be a bad first draft for Yuji, where Kinjaku was trying to create a vessel for Sukuna with his twin brother's bloodline, but failed. Why Jin wasn't suitable? We don't know, right? So Kinjaku put the cleats back on, strapped back in, and went for round two to try and create Yuji. So maybe he's like, I know exactly what's going on here. Like, I thought we had escaped from you, whatever the case may be. So that would explain that stern look, being like, you know what? I don't care what you do, son. Just get away from her. She's death, because he's speaking from experience. Now, if this is true, and it's a big if, it does beg a million other questions about just how much he knew, right? Like, was he simply manipulated by somebody with a scar in the past and that was it? Or does he have any familiarity with the world of Jujutsu sorcery, right? Does he know that he's the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin brother? Does he know that that's what Kinjaku was ultimately after in trying to like birth an heir, or a vessel rather, right? And really we don't know. And you might say, well, if this was the case and he did have some history with Kinjaku, then wouldn't that have been made apparent in the story? And maybe, but this is Gege Akutami we're talking about after all. The reveal that he was the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin brother came in an interview after the series had ended, right? So I do think it's possible that he could have a history with Kinjaku, and that is like the impetus for this entire moment. Now, I think this is something that will just stay fun headcanon for me personally, because I doubt Gege is ever going to comment on this unless he's like explicitly asked about it in an interview or something. But to me, it just makes more sense that his grandpa would have some sort of history with Kinjaku, however deep or shallow it may be. Like maybe he knows nothing about the world of sorcery or Sukuna or anything, and all he knows is that he was manipulated by somebody with a scar. Or maybe he knows everything, right? But in either case, this reaction just makes more sense to me if he knows a little bit more than just my daughter-in-law somehow came back to life, right? Because this isn't the reaction you would have to that, in my opinion, right? Again, you would be more scared or nervous or being like that's not normal, son. Like something weird is going on here. Why aren't you questioning this? Instead, no, it's like, no, like I've seen this before. I know what this spells. You're going to die if you don't get away from this. Like, to me, it speaks from experience and not from ignorance. But would love to hear y'all's thoughts. I will say, to play devil's advocate, though, that the more his grandpa knew, the more irresponsible it was for him not to tell Yuji anything, right? Like, if he knew he was the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin brother, he knew about Kinjaku's plan, he knew about sorcery, then, like, you really could have helped Yuji out by filling him in on a little bit of things. So, for my money, I bet he didn't know too much about those things, and again, was probably just manipulated by somebody with a scar in the past that, he has some bad memories about. And so if that was true, then I think it makes a little bit more sense on why he maybe wouldn't fill Yuji in on this. But I mean, even if it was that, he should be like, hey, don't ever date anybody with a scar. They are no good for our family. But yeah, anyway, I think ultimately that's what he was going to tell Yuji, just about his mom and the scar and the way she came back to life and how that was really weird. And, however deep you want to go beyond that is headcanon territory, but I personally think he knew Kinjaku.